All right, let's jump right into a truly incredible book, Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. This isn't just any novel, it's a landmark piece of fiction where, get this, the life of one single man becomes the sprawling, chaotic, and totally magical story of an entire nation. So, the whole book hinges on this one absolutely brilliant question. Just think about it for a second. What if your life story was also the story of your country? What if your birth, your body, your entire fate was like handcuffed to the destiny of your homeland? Imagine if every personal win, every private screw-up was also a major national event. Kind of wild, right?
Okay, so meet our main guy, Salim Sinai. He's born at the exact moment of India's independence, midnight, August 15th, 1947. And you gotta understand, this is no coincidence. It's the engine that drives the whole story. His life is literally born at the very same second as modern India.
Which brings us to our first big idea here, a nation in a man. In this book, the idea that a single person can represent a whole nation, well, Rushdie doesn't just treat it as a metaphor. He makes it completely 100% literal.
Okay, check this out. This is where it gets really clever. Salim's body is basically a map of India. His birth, that's independence, obviously. He's got this famously large, always dripping nose, and that comes to stand for all the endless corruption and chaos. Even a birthmark on his face is literally shaped like the Indian subcontinent. And later, as his body starts to crack and fall apart, it's a direct mirror of the political crises tearing the nation apart. It's just brilliant.
And Salim, he's all in on this. He completely embraces this connection. He doesn't even see his life as his own. To him, he's more like a living archive, a container for all the history that came before him. He's not just a guy, he's a living, breathing, historical consequence.
But here's the thing. Salim isn't alone in this, not by a long shot. His birth is just one piece of a much bigger, much more magical puzzle. This is where we meet the children of midnight. So get this, in that very first hour of India's independence, 1,001 children were born. And that number, 1,001, totally intentional. It's a direct nod to the 1,001 nights, the Arabian Nights. It immediately tells you we're in the realm of myth and magic. And here's the kicker. Every single one of those children was born with some kind of supernatural power.
Salim's gift is telepathy, which is super important because it lets him connect with all the other kids. But just look at the range of these powers. You've got his rival, Shiva, who has this insane, destructive warrior strength. Then there's Parvati the witch, who can do real magic and illusions. Others can do alchemy, stop time, see the future. The list goes on. And these gifts aren't just random cool powers. They're meant to represent the huge, contradictory, and kind of miraculous diversity of India itself. So Salim uses his telepathy to create this psychic conference, basically a parliament inside his head where all the children can meet. It's this beautiful, hopeful vision of a truly united India. But it all falls apart. It collapses for the exact same reasons the real-world dream of a united India was starting to fragment. All the old divisions, religion, caste, language, politics, they tear the psychic conference apart. In the end, the children's failure is India's failure. It's heartbreaking.
Okay, so let's zoom in on how this plays out over the years. Because Salim's life isn't just a symbolic mirror of India. Oh no, his personal timeline gets completely hijacked by the major events of history. He becomes a body of history.
This timeline just lays it all out so clearly. 1947, he's born, just as India gains independence and is torn apart by partition. 1965, his family moves to Pakistan, and what happens? The Indo-Pak War breaks out. 1971, the Bangladesh War of Independence starts, and a bomb blast gives him amnesia. I mean, how symbolic is that? A literal erasure of his identity while the nation is being violently redefined. And then, when he finally makes it back to India in 1975, the country is sliding into dictatorship with the declaration of the emergency. His life is just battered by history.
And the book is really clear about this. The foundational moment of modern India was not some glorious victory. It was partition. Rushdie even calls it a crime of midnight. It's framed as the original trauma, this brutal wound that created a permanent sense of not belonging, of suspicion, that just haunts everything and everyone for the rest of the story.
So this really critical view of partition, that's part of a much bigger project the novel is undertaking. It's all about challenging the official story. This is history versus the official story.
What Rushdie is doing here is writing what you might call a counter-history.
right? So instead of focusing on the big speeches from prime ministers or the official proclamations, he tells the story of India through all the messy, personal stuff. Family fights, random accidents, little betrayals, and especially through the voices of people who are usually just erased from the official textbooks. It's history from the bottom up, not the top down.
And what does this kind of history show us? Well, it reveals a pretty painful truth. The novel basically argues that independence didn't really end conflict, it just swapped out the opponents. That one big conflict, British versus Indian, was replaced by a whole bunch of new internal ones. Suddenly it was Hindu versus Muslim, North versus South, India versus Pakistan, and eventually democracy versus dictatorship. You can see this whole internal struggle perfectly in these two characters, Salim, the storyteller, versus his rival Shiva, the warrior. They're like two sides of a coin. Salim represents the India of memory, diversity, and imagination. It's a fragile, vulnerable idea. But Shiva, he's all about force, aggressive nationalism, and raw power. You could say one is the India that could have been, and the other is the India that the novel is afraid it's become. And this whole conflict really comes to a head with the 1975 emergency. The novel calls the leader the widow, a pretty clear reference to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And during this dark period when democracy was suspended, all the Midnight's children are hunted down and rounded up. And what happens to them is horrifying. Their powers are destroyed, and they are forcibly sterilized. Think about that metaphor. It's the state literally sterilizing the nation's future, its hope, its imagination, its diversity.
And this is exactly why the book needs magic. Rushdie himself has said it. When reality becomes unbelievable, only the fantastic can explain it. Magical realism isn't some escape from the real world. It's a political weapon. Because when actual events, like a government sterilizing its own gifted children, become so bizarre and so absurd, you can't tell that story straight. You need the fantastic to even begin to capture how insane it all is.
So, after all that, in the face of this political nightmare, what's left? What can you possibly do? Well, for Rushdie, and for our hero Salim, the only weapon they have is memory. The only real act of resistance is to tell the story. This is memory against forgetting. As we get to the end of the book, Salim is in a pickle factory, of all places, and he's frantically writing down his life story. A pickle factory? Why? Well, think about it. He's literally pickling history. He's preserving memories like they're mangoes in a jar, trying to save the past before it disappears. It's his final stand against the government's attempt to make everyone forget. Storytelling becomes this deeply political act. And really, that brings us to the heart of what Midnight's Children is all about. This one quote pretty much sums it up. To understand just one life, you have to swallow the whole world. You just can't separate a single person's life from the massive, sweeping forces of history that shape it. Your story is never, ever just your own. It's tied up with everyone else's.
And so the book leaves us with this huge, powerful question to think about. If a nation is really just a story we tell ourselves, then who gets to write it? Who gets to be the storyteller? Is it the government with its neat and tidy official history? Or is it the people with all their messy, complicated, contradictory, and, yes, magical memories? That's the question Rushdie leaves us with.